Good morning. This is Eli from Longshadows Ranch, and I'm going to do this video about making cheese curds. So many people comment that they love our cheese curds, and they're so easy to make at home that I thought I'd just do this quick video. So what I have here is a 1 and a bit gallon metal pot, and inside is 1 gallon of raw whole milk. And I'm going to bring this to the 90-degree Fahrenheit temperature slowly. So there's the milk. I'm going to put the stove on low because you don't want to heat it too fast. And I'm going to put a thermometer in it. And when it hits 90 degrees, we'll move on to step 2. Okay, so that took about 30 minutes for that to hit 90 degrees. The next step is we're going to add some rennet. And this is animal rennet that we get at our local brew store. And that does 2 gallons of milk per 1/2 teaspoon. And we're going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon. Now normally, if I'm making Gouda cheese, I would first put a cup of kefir in here, and then I'd let it sit for an hour, and then I would put the rennet. But because we're making cheese curds, and those will get eaten over the next 2 to 3 days, I'm skipping the kefir step, and I'm just putting in the rennet. So what we'll do is we'll dissolve the rennet in water, and then we will add it to this pot, stir it up, and let it sit for an hour. Okay, so here Sophie's doing 1/4 teaspoon of the rennet. Just putting it in quite a bit of water, probably 4 or 5 ounces, stirring it up, and then we're going to add it to the pot, and we're going to stir, not too much, slowly, and we want it evenly dispersed in the pot. And it's not going to coagulate quickly like lemon juice or vinegar does. It just will start to set the milk over the next hour. Okay, and then we'll be back. A couple of important things to mention while we're waiting on the hour to pass for this milk to set is that you want to keep this as close to 90 degrees as you can. Now, we're using the stove for other things, so I'm not leaving the pot on the stove or it'll continue to warm up. And I've just moved it over to the counter, and we'll put the lid on it to keep the heat in it. And periodically I'll come and check and make sure it's at 90 degrees, and I'll keep the milk as still as possible in the pot. I don't want to jostle it around. If it drops below 90, then I will turn the heat on for just not even 2 minutes or so, and that'll bring it right back up to hover around 90 degrees. So it's been about 30 minutes since I put the rennet in, and we have 28 or 29 minutes or so to go. So now what I'm doing is I've taken 1.5 gallons, this is a 1.5 gallon pot, full of clean filtered water, and I'm going to heat that up to 130 degrees. And we're going to use that to wash the curds 3 times, but we'll get there in just a little bit. Okay, now it's been about an hour since we put the rennet in. We checked the temperature, it's still at 90, so that's all good. Now what we're going to do is cut the cheese. And we have a nice cheese cutter there. That's designed for the long pots, but it works for any pot. And what Sophie's doing now is she's coming and cutting it across one direction. Now, when you're making Gouda, you have to wait in between each cut because this is considered a low acidic cheese, right? There's no acid in here right now. But because we're making cheese curds, that's not so important. So first she cuts it across this way, and it should be, what we're looking for is about the consistency of a egg white, ultimately. So you can see how that is cutting into solid chunks there. These are the curds. and the whey is what's left behind. So she's going to keep doing that, and then we're going to start stirring it. And it takes a minute to get it all stirred up, and then we're going to stir it for about a half an hour. And now you can see those are big chunks. And as you stir it, you want to kind of break up. You stir it very gently because we're not going for cottage cheese here. We still want to leave these in about 1-inch cubes. And she uses the spoon to cut any of the big pieces that are remaining. And it cuts super easy, like room temperature butter almost. And as we stir this, those curds will start to lose whey and they'll start to firm up even more. And so we're going to do this for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we'll be back for the next step. So what we're doing on this next step is we're washing. So we're washing the curds, and you do it 3 times. And basically it is removing about 1/3 of the liquid that's in the pot, leaving the curds behind, and then you add back in fresh, clean, filtered water that's at 130 degrees. And this is what we do. So I'm going to set that spoon to the side. I use a strainer and I use a 2-cup measurer. And I'm going to just fill this up and I pour it through the strainer so that I don't lose any curds. And I'm going to take about 6 cups of water out. And I'll let that drip just a little bit. Then I'll put that back in the pot. And then from my fresh water, I'm going to put it in, and you need a helper here. Or if you're got good dexterity, you're going to stir it as you put the water back in. And it's pretty easy to know. You don't have to measure so much. You can see the line on the pot right here where the whey was, where the liquid was before I took some out. And so I'm just going to add the water back in. Now, when you're making Gouda, you have to do this much more slowly than I'm doing it, but we're doing cheese curds, so you don't really have to worry about it. The temperature of the water that we're putting in, this 130 degree water, is making these curds much firmer than they were. And it also forces more whey out. So we're going to do that 3 times, and then we'll be back with the next step. Okay, so now we've washed it 3 times and we're ready to strain it out and salt it and form it into cheese curds. And I just want to mention that the whey that you take out of the pot can actually be saved and fed to chickens or pigs or used to water plants in the garden. It's really good stuff. We do that all the time. So today we just decided to not do that, but usually we do. So what we're going to do now is strain this off, and we've let that sit for about 5 minutes to let the curds start to bind together at the bottom because it makes it easier to pour it off. And we always pour it through a strainer because we don't want to lose any of the curds. And you can see how they're binding together at the bottom in a nice chunk. So it's not like when you go to pour them, they pour out. I'll try and get a better shot of that. And the rest of the whey that's in there is going to drain out when we put it in the strainer here. So Sophie's just going to dump that out. Sorry. And now it's in here in a nice chunk, and we're going to salt this with non-iodized salt to draw even more whey out of it. And then we'll just let it hang and let the whey continue to drip out of it until it's as dry as we want it to be, and then we'll cut it into our cheese curds. We used about 2 tablespoons of salt and just sprinkled it over the top. And now we're going to take a spoon and we're going to mix it into the cheese curds, kind of chop it into it like this, so that we work it through all the curds. And that's before it starts to form a pretty solid chunk. Yeah, extra hands are very helpful. I know you can't really see that very good. So that's all I'm going to do is stir it around to get the salt mixed in and let the whey come out. So this is all salted now, and I'm going to hang it. And you can see there's already quite a bit of whey in the bowl. Can you see the bowl? And the reason I'm going to hang it is I'm going to let gravity help me out here. So I just use a pot, and you don't want the bottom of the hanging cheese curds to touch, you don't want the bottom to touch the bottom of the pan. So it needs to be a tall enough pan that it can truly hang. And I'm just going to tie the 4 corners together. So there's 2 corners, and here's the other 2 corners. And I don't make it super tight because I want to be able to untie it. So I kind of have this bag here, and it's hanging about that far off the bottom, and it won't lose that much whey. And if you're worried about, just get a long wooden spoon, something like that, and then just set it to the side, and we'll let that hang for a couple of hours. Okay, so this is hung for a couple of hours, and now what I'm going to do is break it into chunks that we want our cheese curds to be. And I'm going to salt it again so we can draw out even more whey, and so it has a nice salty flavor when we eat them. And I just use my fingers. You could use a knife if you wanted to, and cut them into more uniform sizes, but my whole family will descend on these this afternoon, and it won't really matter what they look like to them. So I'm going to break it in these pieces. Okay, so I've broken it all into pieces, and now I'm going to put maybe another half a tablespoon of salt over the top. Mix it around. Now these you might think this is going to be really salty, but it won't, because as it pulls whey out, again, the salt is going to travel out with the liquid. And can you really have too salty of cheese? Never. Okay, and then when it's all done, which you won't see on the video, these will go into a container in the refrigerator. You know you've done a perfect job if they're kind of squeaky when you eat them. They lose that squeakiness over a couple of days. And this is probably good in the fridge up to a week if they last that long. Thanks for watching how to make cheese curds.